Welcome to the second episode of Richmond's $1 Million Startup Podcast, presented by BenX Consulting Group. Today, we have James Goodwillie, co-founder of Brightleaf Mortgage on, and he's going to discuss why he founded the company, some of the challenges he's faced, some tips and tricks for young entrepreneurs and leaders, and how they've turned a company from zero to multi-million dollars. James, thanks for joining.
Yeah, anytime.
I am super excited to have James. Me and James have known each other for a while now, have become friends, actually training for a little event together, which is a lot more out of my comfort zone than his, as he is currently kicking my entire ass in that.
No, don't beat yourself. Don't beat yourself up.
But anyway, super excited. Thanks again for coming.
Yeah, of course.
So what I kind of want to do is talk a little bit about you personally, kind of your upbringing, what got you to be, I guess, where you are today, and then kind of dive a little bit more in the business side of it. So why don't you tell everyone listening kind of, a little bit more personally about your upbringing and story?
Yeah. You want to start at birth or middle school, high school?
Whatever important events you think are important.
All right. So I was born and raised in Richmond. Grew up here for all but 9 months of my life when we lived in Northern Virginia for a little bit. Grew up in Short Pump. Went to Godwin High School. Then stayed in state for college. Went to VMI. And yeah, I grew up swimming, baseball, all the typical sports that I guess you would, except swimming. Probably not that typical, but
right.
Yeah.
Not in South Hill, at least.
That's right.
There's no swimming in South Hill.
Right.
I can promise that. I don't think we had an Olympic-sized pool.
Yeah, that probably not.
Probably not.
Actually. Yeah, it's a big in Richmond, probably not that big anywhere else.
So you went to VMI, and obviously because I know you pretty well, you have a pretty strong connection with some people at VMI. Talk to me about the network and what VMI did for you, I guess.
Yeah, so my grandfather and father both went there.
Gotcha.
And so I made the decision pretty easily. They didn't pressure me at all really to go there, but I knew from their point of view and what they'd been through that it's a incredible network. And the relationships and teachings that you kind of learn from there are pretty tremendous. So the network is everything that people say it is. It's pretty unbeatable in terms of what you get by going there. It's hard, but it's not impossible. It's certainly not your normal college experience, but because everyone that graduated from there basically did similar things that you did during those 4 years, you kind of create this bond that I don't think a lot of other colleges have. So especially of that size.
That's awesome.
So
you graduated VMI. You said grew up in Richmond. And then after VMI, talk to me about the career path, because I know for me, for example, when I graduated college, I had zero idea what to do.
Yeah, so I was very, very similar up until the summer going into my senior year. So I was a biology and chemistry major at VMI and thought I wanted to go in the kind of pre-med, medical route. And through internships and shadowing and things like that, I realized pretty quickly I did not want to do anything related to biology or chemistry. So at that point, I was pretty too far in. I said, I'll just stick with it and finish. But I've always been one of those kind of idea guys and have a little journal always, and always have since probably, high school, with a bunch of crazy ideas. And so one of them I had was, I thought was pretty good, and told my parents that I'm going to run with this. And so started working on that going into my senior year at VMI. And then, so that's what I did when I graduated.
What was the idea?
So it was called Blue Bags. And if you know what Pinterest is, it was basically Pinterest, but instead of only pictures like it was back then, it allowed you to pull the pictures, the descriptions, the prices from any product anywhere on the internet, and then organize it however you wanted to.
Oh.
So you could have a shoes bag, a watches bag, and then there was a social piece because social media was all the buzz back then. Everything had to have a social media aspect, right? So
still technically kind of does.
Yeah, pretty much. So had that, and it we launched the website in the summer of 2012, and then launched the app, the iPhone app, in I think it was October or November of that year, and then Apple put it on their new and noteworthy section right before Christmas, so it blew up.
Wow. So talk to me about the transition, because you said you were biology, chemistry, which were not my favorite classes. But talk to me about the transition from that to all of a sudden you're starting this company, you're utilizing obviously technology, making an app, using social. So how did you go from the biology guy to all of a sudden we have a technology company?
Yeah, good question. And I don't quite know. I think the biggest thing was probably just my curiosity. So I always wanted to find out how to do something, or find someone who knew what to do. So I think that was my probably only skill set going into it, other than the idea. And so I just surrounded myself with people that knew what they were doing. So whether that was people who had built an app before, or people who had built a tech website before, or people who had built a company before, because that was all of it, the execution. And so figuring out who do I need to get to build this website? What type of developer? What type of designer? What how the hell do I do accounting? Right? All this stuff that I had no idea about. I mean, even if I was a business major, it probably still wouldn't have really taught me that. So it was kind of a trial by fire and lean on as many people as I could.
Sure. So a lot of those people, was it just you who founded it, or was it multiple individuals?
Yeah, so it was me that founded it, and then I brought on a kind of partner that
Did you know
helped.
the partner? Was it kind of like more?
Yeah, so he went to VMI with me.
Gotcha.
And he was a pretty creative person, and I am not. So I brought him on to kind of handle that kind of marketing aspect of things. So he was well versed in all that social media, all those platforms, and I didn't even have an Instagram, so I needed somebody that could kind of traverse that whole world.
Sure. And then did you guys hire any employees, or because you sold that company, correct? So from the time you started it until you sold it, was there any employee management, or talk to me the process of, I guess, going through to sell it?
Yeah, so we kind of contracted out everything, every piece of it. We had a team of developers that we worked with we had a different team that built the website, because it's two totally different developing kind of processes for those. So we had a graphic design team that did all the wireframes and the workups and all that. Then we had a website team that built the website. Then we had a app team that did that. And then, so it kind of, we didn't have to really worry about the salary aspect or benefits or anything like that. They had their own companies at that time. So some of them were freelancers that worked with other clients, and then some had a full out company with multiple employees.
So you sold it, and what year was that you sold it?
2013.
Okay. So you sold it, and I'm guessing you're still not drinking Mai Tais by the beach.
No, I'm not. I'm here. So yeah.
So you sold it, and then talk to me about the transition. Once you sold the company, you're like, all right, we're getting out of this. Were like, all right, I'm just going to work a normal job, or did you still kind of know you want to pursue more of the entrepreneur route? Yeah,
the biggest thing was, and this, I wish I could take credit for this myself, but
you can.
All right. My entire idea was, if I'm going to do this again, and I'm going to try and build something again, I have to make sure that I'm a little more well-versed in the various aspects of building a business. And the one thing that I was terrible at was marketing. So the guy that I brought on as a partner, he knew about the platforms and everything, but he still didn't really know anything about marketing. So it didn't really pan out as well as I think we all anticipated. And so I realized I needed to have a better grasp of that world. And so instead of trying to start something else, pick one of the other ideas in my little booklet. I said, I'm going to dive headfirst into marketing.
Gotcha. And, a lot of times I think people think marketing is just this like, all right, put stuff up, run Facebook ads, and
Right.
next thing you know, you're a millionaire.
Yeah.
And it can get obviously really complex, as you know. So you dove headfirst into marketing, and that was with a mortgage company.
Marketing agency.
Marketing agency.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
It was a digital marketing agency. They're actually in Richmond called Workshop Digital. At the time, they were called Dynamic Web Solutions.
Gotcha.
They were pretty small at the time. I think I was maybe employee 5. And they focused primarily on SEO, so search engine optimization. So, fixing websites and making sure they show up in the organic rankings of Google. And I came in to help build up their social media marketing department.
Gotcha. And I imagine you learned a good amount.
Oh, yeah. I learned that I didn't know a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
I learned that somehow every day.
Yeah. Right.
And so, real quick question before we dive into Brightleaf and what you have going on now. I'm always curious because people sit on two sides of this fence.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think, being an entrepreneur, being a leader, being a founder, a visionary is something that you've always had? Like, when you were 8 years old, definitely, you talked about the idea booklet, or was it something, you realized you could develop after a certain period of time?
Really good question. I think when I was a little younger and probably more cocky, I probably thought I was born with this,
Sure.
but I think the only thing that we're ever really born with is maybe the that idea generation aspect of it. And I was certainly, there's a piece of that I was born with. I think a large part was my family as well. But yeah, I think that's probably the only thing that I would say I was genetic or something. But as any business owner would say, the idea is maybe like 1%, right? It's the execution is everything else. And so I think that aspect of it is mainly learned. And then I think having that first one out the gate, that first business that, we had some successes, but we had plenty of failures there as well. Having that and knowing that fear of failure isn't really there anymore. And I know what it's like to fail and mess things up, I think helps when moving forward and trying to start other stuff as well.
Sure. So you started Brightleaf exactly when? The current company you're with?
Let's see. So 2019 is when we started to form it.
Mm-hmm.
But come to find out, starting a financial institution takes a lot of work. So it took us about a year till we got licensed.
Gotcha. Around COVID, I guess, 2020.
Yeah, March of 2020 is when we got our actual license. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I talked to a good amount of people. Side note, that's like March 2020 is when I started this. And
Yeah.
I'm like, when I bought this house. And
Yeah.
I'm like, are you serious?
I know.
You really bought it?
I know. It's like a point in time now.
Yeah.
It's like, BC and
Everyone-
AD. It's like now we have COVID.
Everyone I knew bought houses March 3rd.
March 3rd. Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
The shutdown.
So before we dive into Brightleaf and the operations, and I want to learn more about that, I want to know, because this is not your first startup, obviously the first company you founded. What are a couple lessons that you learned in your first startup or out of the get-go that really helped? Because obviously you guys are doing well now at Brightleaf, or everything's relative, but in my eyes, you guys are crushing it. Well, what are some things you learned in your first startup that you helped transition, or some failures?
Yeah. So I think one of them is, I've learned some stuff that I picked up myself, and I've learned plenty of things that other people have told me. And then I've learned stuff from the few companies that I've worked at as just a normal employee. I think one of the things that helped me, because I was very much afraid of failure, right? I had plenty of ideas, but the last thing I wanted to do was
Implement them.
Right, exactly, yeah, because
Right.
I was just petrified of failing. And that crushed us a lot with the first company, with Blue Bags. And I think moving forward, one of the CEOs at a company that I worked for had this saying that he said, fail, but fail fast, right? So I think that, and I don't know if it was his saying or somebody else's, but it was one that stuck with me quite a bit. And it's like, it doesn't matter. You're always going to mess something up. But if you do, don't rub it in. Don't really think about it, learn from it, and then move on and quickly, instead of kind of dragging it out until it becomes one giant failure.
Sure.
So that was one of them. The other one is, don't listen to the critics. So everyone hates the person that has a good idea. Everyone hates the person that has a success. Everyone hates, those types of people. And so there's a lot of people that chirp from the sidelines and are going to tell you that it's a bad idea. It's not going to work. How is that any different than this?
Right.
That doesn't make sense to me.
You're not Steve Jobs.
Right. No one's going to buy this, whatever it is, right? And whatever you're selling. And I think for a lot of founders, people take things really personally, especially if it comes from like a friend or a loved one. And oftentimes they do. And it's hard, right? It's hard to hear, oh, that's not going to work. But that doesn't really make any sense when you've spent months trying to make this work. And you got to realize that you know more than they do, right? In most of the time,
right?
Unless you're starting a tech company and they own a tech company, you probably have just as much say in making it happen. So I think not necessarily listening to the critics and taking it personally, but still listening to them and taking their feedback, because constructively. I think a lot of times their message may come across as too harsh or too critical. But under that message is typically something that has some truth to it, right? It's, if they say, well, I don't really get it, that doesn't make any sense, no one's gonna understand that.
Right.
You don't just sit there and go, oh, well, you're just too dumb to understand, right? If they don't understand it, you probably need to simplify it a little more, right? So that's something that I think is big as well. And then not only just with people that tell you bad feedback or bad things about your idea and business, but also just talking to everyone that you possibly can. So, I've called you plenty of times about ideas and pivots or changes in the business that we're thinking about. And I do the same thing to a lot of other people. And I think that's key, because everyone has a different outlook. Everyone has a different perspective.
Right. I think to kind of piggyback off the criticism piece, actually at church last Sunday I had a really great analogy that was like, the pastor was like, well, I want everyone to like me. I want to do a good job. And the other pastor goes, you don't sell ice cream. Mm-hmm. It's like, if you want everyone to like you, sell ice cream. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, that's great.
Mm-hmm. And then you're still going to have somebody that's like, down. Why don't you sell almond milk ice cream? Right. There's going to be someone still on the sideline.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to piggyback a little bit off the failure piece, I think it's a lot about eating the frog too. It's like the more you fail, I feel like the better you get at failing. Mm-hmm. Right. And like especially if you're trying to raise money or do different things, the more you hear no, the easier the ninth no gets to the second no.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think I was also super shy coming out of VMI. And so, having a...
Were you really?
Yeah.
I would have
really
never guessed that.
Really shy. And so a lot of times I would just be both petrified of failure and petrified to talk to people. And that, when you're trying to raise money or talk to people, that's terrible. So I especially when trying to raise money, hearing no a billion times. That first one, I was shaking, I was sweating, I was so nervous. My voice was probably cracking. But then they said no, right? And it's like, oh, that was it? It was just a no? Like, okay, fine. They didn't they didn't harass me. They didn't like yell at me and tell me I'm an idiot. They just said no. I had people say that in college. I didn't, this was pretty easy.
Yeah.
And so doing that and hearing that, it definitely helps. And so now whenever I come across a situation that I'm maybe hesitant towards, I just kind of jump in, and the worst that can happen is somebody says no.
Absolutely. That was like me in high school, when the girls said no and I kept going. Man, tell you what, when the 12th said no, I'm telling you what, it didn't feel nearly as bad as when the first said no.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's dive in a little bit more towards Brightleaf, what you currently have going on. And so I'm curious, because you guys are 3 years into it. This will be year 3. And with the growth and everything you guys are experiencing, what are a couple major challenges? It could be industry specific or it could be personally as being a founder. What are some major challenges that you're running into year 3 or kind of more past the quote unquote startup phase?
I'd say, personally and business wise, they're both a ton. And I think, personally, my partner and I both have families, and we both have a wife, and he has 3 kids. I have 2. And that's hard. Very, very hard. You work a lot. you have to grind. It's a constant grind, and that rubs off. It's got to rub off somewhere, and a lot of times it's at home.
Right.
And even if you're not actively working, there's still a level of stress that I think any founder or entrepreneur with an early-ish stage company has, carries around with them. And trying to not have that and not portray that when you're with your kids or your wife is hard.
Oh, I bet.
And then also talking about it, right? It's, my wife hears every little detail, and I'm sure there's a lot of times where at least I hope that she turns her brain off sometimes and just goes, okay, yeah, oh man, that's terrible.
That's good.
Yeah, right, yeah, exactly.
Great job, James.
Right, yeah. I hope she doesn't actually listen to everything,
right?
Because it's just it's a lot. But so that personally, it takes its toll. And as well with friends, right? There's a lot of times it's like, well, I have a family and I have a business, so that's all I got. I don't have time to go play golf or go to this, bachelor party or whatever it is.
Right.
And that's pretty hard. Yeah. And you sacrifice a lot. Business wise, I think, market specific, there's a lot going on. Rates are crazy right now.
Right.
That doesn't help. There's not a lot of homes being sold. It's a very interesting, and especially in Richmond. Richmond is getting hit real hard. So that's been tough. But as well as just, the little things, right? It's the having to wear so many hats all the time. And then you wear one, and you're like, I got this whole day where I'm going to spend on this. And then 7 things fly your way. And
right.
It's, figuring out not only how to do it all or how to navigate all those issues, but trying to delegate as many as possible away from you to hopefully free up that time to do that one thing that you were trying to do.
Right. And let's talk a little bit at first what you said, obviously giving up some things personally. It's always kind of a delicate balance with what you're going to do work-wise, because obviously with the amount of work that you're putting in, one of the things people, and we actually talk about it all the time, but obviously people want to know is work-life balance, of course. And what are some tips you would give kind of aspiring entrepreneurs, people who are 1, 2, 3, 5 years into this thing, and they're really still like, business is going well, but my relationship with my wife is not.
Yeah. That you can always start another business. So focus on your wife first off. But
good point.
I think the key is trying to find that balance and communicating that with your wife, right? There's been plenty of times, and I can say this because I've messed it up plenty of times, but
right. There's
been plenty of times that I've thought I've been good and I've been present and I've been, not carrying the stress around. And then, when my wife and I talk about it, she makes it clear that it's not necessarily the case, right? And then there's other times where I think I'm carrying around too much or doing too much. And then she's like, hey, if you want to work Saturday, I could take the kids away or to the pool or whatever it may be. So finding that balance and having that communication is key. The other is just figuring out what works, right? So my wife likes to read after the kids go to bed, right? So it's, we want to be close to each other, but she's reading, so she's doing something. So that's a prime time for me to get work done. So instead of coming home, if I see an email come in and it's dinner time or my kids are asking me to play, I'm not picking up that phone, or at least trying not to, because I know when the kids go to bed, I can sit next to her on the couch, open my laptop and do some work. So
right.
Finding those pockets of time to keep going. And then for me, early in the morning is also another key piece.
That's good. So just kind of find your balance. I mean, obviously it's going to be different, it seems like, for everyone.
Absolutely, yeah.
How do you de-stress with everything? Because I look up to you with having, 2 kids, having a wife, like obviously being a founder of this company and working on this. Like what do you do to de-stress? You're not taking 3-week vacations that I know of.
No, it's, I don't know if that's necessarily ever a thing. I don't know if I had necessarily ever de-stress, but it's kind of putting it all into perspective, I think. I have a tendency to think of things very, I think of things from the business perspective of very far out, but the stresses I think about like right now, like if I don't get this done or this doesn't happen, it's going to eat me alive. And managing that is the biggest way that I keep moving forward. So whether it's, predominantly it's running or working out early in the mornings before my kids get up, and then just being around my kids is a pretty good reset.
Yeah. I will say for me, in the 3 or 4 weeks we've been training, it has been so nice just to get it done in the morning and just kind of have the rest of the day where you're like, okay, I ate the frog per se.
Yep. You already did the hard thing.
Yeah. One of the things I want to extract after the work-life balance was when you said, obviously the industry is not going ideal. And I think people run into that all the time. They'll start a tech company, they'll start some kind of company and it might go well for a while and then they hit a recession or something, macro happens. But you've done a good job or that I know of as far as being creative and looking at different outside the box options. So tell me how important it is. So when you do get hit with like a macro, like a political roadblock, or with you in your instance, the Fed, how important is it to kind of be creative and think outside the box?
Yeah, that's a massive piece, is being able to pivot and pivot quick is one of the keys to any startup. Nothing's ever going to go exactly how you planned. And so not only being able to pivot, but being able to recognize that you need to pivot, and then pivoting is huge. So, not waiting to the very last second and going, oh shit, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on here, but
you can do whatever you want on here.
All right, great.
Yeah.
So not looking at that at the very last second and looking forward enough to say, all right, I think this is probably going to happen. So let's think about how we're going to get over that.
Good. Yeah, that's good, man. Let's switch it up just a touch. I want to ask a couple personal questions. Really personal. No, I'm kidding. What one thing I want to know, excited, because you're really like upbeat person. So what's one thing personally you're really excited for, and then professionally?
Ooh, personally, let's see. Probably vacation. So I think we're probably going to take a trip down to the Bahamas here with all the kids,
cool.
and so that'll be fun. I think that's as well as the school year. My son's getting excited about it. He's going into first grade, so
that's awesome.
He's getting excited. So that'll be good as well. Professionally, I think with what you said, we've implemented kind of a new way of doing business, and I think it's going really well. We've gotten a lot of traction, so it's that honeymoon phase of the business again, that of the startup again, where it's like we're building something different and at least different than normal, and that's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So James, what are a couple things? I know we talked about you being creative, upbeat, resilient. What are some things that you guys are implementing currently, like real world examples at Brightleaf?
So one of the things that we kind of did that pivoted us away from the traditional mortgage broker type industry was looking at mortgages and figuring out how we can both acquire a large group of people and as well as change things up a bit to make it cheaper, right? One of the reasons we started it was just because of the level of greed in mortgages. Right. And so,
do you want to call anyone out specifically when you say that?
A lot of people. Do we have like 4 hours?
Yeah, 4.5 actually.
Okay.
Then we have to get out of here. They close.
Okay. All right. I'll keep it short then. So I think that was what we did and kind of looked at was how can we, flip the model on its head a little bit. And one of the ways that we're doing it is through a more of a benefits type program. So offering mortgages to companies as well as government, that's the civil servants of the world.
Right.
So that gotten a lot of reception on that.
Yeah. Where did that idea come from? Just scrolling newspaper?
Yeah, exactly. So I was looking at a chart that showed the average home price in America versus the average income of an American. And, a couple decades ago, the ratio was 2. So right around 2, which meant the average American's 2 years of income would get them an average home. And at the end of 2021, when the numbers came out, it was right around 7. So now 7 years of income for an average American gets them an average house. So I couldn't go make people sell their homes for less, and I couldn't make people or businesses or counties or states pay their employees more. So I tried to find a way that could make the affordability a little bit easier. So that bridge the gap by loosening the standards a little bit.
Now, that's not a stat I think they want published, right? Like, where do you find that? Was that?
Yeah, I mean, it's all it's all public, but it's not you gotta
Street.
Right, yeah, you gotta look for it, but yeah.
Right. Interesting. Interesting. So to switch it up, last couple questions here. Once again, thank you so much for coming, man. Anything you're currently reading or any podcast you're currently listening to?
Yeah. So, I mean, besides this podcast, right? Shout out this podcast.
You might be our 2.6 millionth listener.
There we go. Yeah. I believe it. So right now I am going back and just reading some of the books that, like old high school books that I haven't read in forever. So, 1984 and then, Huck Finn as well.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to go with a chemistry or biology book. Like, wow.
Yeah, read my old organic chemistry textbook.
I mean, good for you. You're like, I still have dreams.
More like nightmares, but yeah.
Right. Quick question. Who would be, I always like to ask people like instrumental or influential people in their life, obviously up to this point. Who would you say are, one or two, and this could be personally, professionally, however you want to take it, but who have been influential or instrumental in your success?
I mean, my wife, first off, obviously. She's the only reason that I'm doing this. She's the one that has to sit through. What would be a cool idea about 1 million times a day? So
the idea guy.
Yeah. So that when I went to her with yet another idea and said, I think this could work one time, and she said, then go for it.
Oh, that's all. That's also support.
Yeah. That's huge, right? So she's by far number one. I think. Personally, the other ones, my kids are pretty big motivating factors, but my parents, just for the way that I was raised, and my mom is super practical, and my dad is more of an ideas type person. So being raised in an environment where he always had ideas as well, and would get excited if I had one or something, helps a lot. And then. Professionally, there's a ton of people, way too many people to mention that have helped me along the way.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the things, to wrap it up, one of the things I want to ask you was morning routine, and a couple reasons. One reason, I'm reading that 5 a.m. book by, is it Robin Sharma, I believe?
Could be, yeah.
Just say yes.
Yes.
So I'm reading that book, and then actually I've been getting up at 5 last few mornings, and I know you are a big proponent in that. So why the heck would we do this, James?
Yeah, I think, you mentioned swallowing the frog. I think that's a big piece. But to me, especially with a family and kids and young kids at that, it's my only me time, right? It's my only time to myself. So, my wife and I both get up at the same time. We get up anywhere between 4:45 and 5 every day. And then we go our separate ways. She goes and works out. I go and work out. And
we're talking about AM.
Yeah.
Eastern.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And it just gives me a good amount of time by myself to clear my head, get my thoughts in order, and kind of embrace the day a little bit.
Yeah. That's awesome. 5 a.m. I mean, marathons. James, what can't you do? Got any weaknesses?
We'll find out if I can run a mortgage company. But
So how can listeners support you? So people listen to this podcast, how can they, you guys big on social, or how can listeners support you?
Yeah, I mean, we have a social, but it's, if you really want to follow a mortgage company, be my guest. But I think right now, if anybody out there is a county worker or a state worker or a teacher or anything like that, first responder, we're currently onboarding counties and in the state of Virginia. So, getting us in touch with their HR or payroll person.
Right.
We've got 12 counties and 11,000 employees currently covered.
That's awesome.
Under it. So it's, helping out as many of those people as we can.
Yeah. What I love about it with me being in the benefit world is it's completely outside the box. I mean, when you came to me with this idea, I was like, first of all, it is a good idea. I've just never seen anyone think like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a lot of times it's tough to explain to people because it isn't. Perhaps, it doesn't exist.
I know for me, you had to explain it a couple of times. Like, so you wanna do what now?
Yeah, it's tough. But it by getting this many people and this large group of people covered, it allows us to cut our rates to the best in America. So it saves, on a small loan, $300,000 or $250,000, you're going to save tens of thousands of dollars in the first 5 years just by through this program. Yeah. So
that's awesome. Well, James, thank you again, man. This has been a blast.
Yeah,
and
thanks for
I'm
having
sure
me.
people are going to have some good information taking this podcast. But look forward to talking soon.
Cool. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for listening to this episode of Richmond's $1 Million Startup Podcast presented by BenX. BenX is a benefit consulting firm that brings clarity to the employee benefits world. They have simplified the process for both employers and employees so they can make better healthcare decisions. Learn more about BenX by visiting benxconsulting.com. If you are enjoying listening to this podcast, please consider sharing the show with some people in your life. This will allow us to continue sharing the stories and insights from Richmond's top young entrepreneurs.